There's this article from Variety that's been going around the last couple of days. It's basically just attacking what it refers to as toxic fans and saying that they're responsible for why a lot of franchises are failing, and saying that these toxic fans just want to hate on franchises all they want. And while it still tries to say that they're just a vocal minority, it also tries to imply that this vocal minority apparently has the power to destroy multi-billion-dollar franchises just by posting a few videos on YouTube or something like that. And as a result, in the article, it says some studios are starting to take some more proactive measures by actually consulting what they refer to as groups of super fans in order to try to get an idea about what people who are fans of these franchises would want when watching a new movie or game or something like that from that franchise. And naturally, a lot of people within the media are upset about this news right now. We have this article right here from Euronews. It's talking about how it doesn't like the idea that studios are consulting with fans, because it basically is just kind of implying it's the same thing as negotiating with terrorists, where it's saying these people are just a bunch of istophobes, don't give them what they want. But it's kind of funny that they're saying that, because now we have Joker 2 come out, which is a follow-up to a movie that made over $1 billion globally. But this one is doing something completely different than what the first movie did. And a lot of people are feeling like it's deliberately trying to antagonize the fan base. And this movie is a colossal failure for the studio. So maybe this is almost lending credence to the idea that perhaps studios and filmmakers should be listening to the fans if they want to produce something that is actually successful. Joker Folie, a genre-bending sequel to the billion-dollar comic book smash, hit a sour note at the box office even as it opened to number one with $40 million. Just to put that into perspective, when the Marvels came out last year, it made $46 million domestically during its opening weekend. So the Joker is actually doing worse than the Marvels, if you can believe it. But it gets even worse too, because the production budget for this movie is around $200 million. So if it follows a similar trajectory as we saw with the Marvels, then it should end up with around $200 million globally, which is pretty bad, because with a budget of the size that they're currently doing, they probably need to make around $500 million at a minimum in order to break even. So it's looking like this movie is probably going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars for Warner Brothers. Those discounted domestic ticket sales were behind initial projections of $50 million to $65 million, a range that was already revised down in the subsequent weeks since Joker 2 landed on pre-release tracking with $70 million. So the long-range trajectory the long-range projections for Joker 2 was around $70 million. Then when they started releasing the early ticket sales, it wasn't going too well. So they were thinking, okay, maybe $50 to $65 million, which is downplaying it considerably, because if it made around that during its opening weekend, then it's a long shot, but it's possible that it could be a success. But with the numbers that we're seeing right now, there's no way at this point that the movie's actually going to make any money. Opening weekend revenues were significantly lower than its predecessor, 2019's Joker, which set an October record with a stellar $96.2 million during the same weekend a half a decade ago. As for Folie, this start is disappointing for Warner Brothers, considering the blockbuster success of the original and the reality that poor word of mouth will likely hurt its big screen staying power. And if you're anything like me, I think a lot of audience were taking kind of a wait and see approach when it comes to this movie. So I think that's a large contributing factor as to why the box office wasn't so good during its opening weekend, because when I first saw the trailer, I made a video talking about it where I said I can see it working. I wasn't necessarily convinced, but I am willing to give it a shot if there is good word of mouth for the movie. And I think a lot of people were taking that same approach. So they were waiting to see what people were saying about this opening weekend. And if it turns out like, yeah, it's a musical, it's something different, but it's actually pretty good too, well, then I think the movie would have had some more legs underneath it, even if it didn't necessarily have as good of an opening weekend as we saw with the first movie. But that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case for this either, because we can see on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience and critic scores are both terrible for this. Now, in the past, it was a little bit more divisive. The critic score was lukewarm, but the audiences seem to like it. But now it seems to be they're both in agreement that there's just problems with this movie all around, and no one seems to be liking it. And that's why I'm thinking we're not going to have it rebound. It's probably not going to have a decent hold. I think what we saw when it comes to this opening weekend is pretty much anyone who was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, who didn't want to take the wait and see approach, went out and saw this movie. And then next weekend, we're probably going to see a pretty steep drop off at the box office, and it's just going to trail off from there and end up most likely being out of theaters in probably a month or so, or if not, like all but be removed from theaters within that time frame. And like I was saying, probably around a couple $100 million theatrically that it'll make globally. That's a problem because the R-rated sequel carries a substantial $200 million price tag. For the first film was produced for a trim $65 million. And that's something I don't get about it. The first one, they made a lot of money on $65 million. So it just goes to show you can make a good Joker movie, something that fans like, without having to spend a ton on it. So I don't know why they decided to make it for a $200 million budget. It really does feel like Todd Phillips, because he initially didn't want to make this movie. So he was just kind of telling the theaters like, okay, fine. Or he was telling the studio, fine, I'll make the movie, but you have to give me a $200 million budget. I get final say on it, and I want to make it a musical. And there's like, yeah, whatever. You've made a lot of money for us in the past, so we'll let you do whatever you want. And he's just kind of like, yeah, suckers, and just does what he wants. That's just kind of a fun thought to think about, but I don't think that he was legitimately trolling. I think he had an idea that he thought could work, and I think in some context it could have actually worked, but just not the way they executed it personally. And just mind you, this isn't me speaking out of experience because I haven't actually watched this movie. This is just from what I've heard from other people talk about this movie. I do plan on watching it eventually and making up more, or having more of a clear idea what's going on. But if what people are saying about this movie is true, this is just kind of the impressions I'm getting from it. Joker was supposed to be a standalone film, but the R-rated tentpole became one of the most profitable comic book movies ever and earned Phoenix an Oscar. And well, this is Hollywood after all. And then there's the people out there who believe that this was initially trying to just subvert what the first movie did because they hated the fan base of the original movie and they wanted to try to do something just to stick it to them. Jeremy Jahns made a point like this in his spoiler review talking about the movie, and just listen to this brief clip of what he says.
We're in this weird time where studios and filmmakers are like, so let's just troll the fans that actually built this thing up. Hundreds of millions of dollars on their own private joke, their own way to stick it to fans. It's so strange. But this
I mean, it does seem like that's the case in certain situations, but I don't think studios are deliberately trying to just throw away money like that just because they hate the fan base. Now, don't get me wrong. I think studios hate the fan base, and I think what they hate about the fan base is just the fact that they need to actually do something that the fans want. People aren't just going to mindlessly consume whatever they give us anymore. We're going to actually be like, no, we're going to reserve judgment. And if it's something good, then we'll buy it. If it's not something that we don't want, then we're just going to leave it out. And that's why I'm just kind of circling back to this initial article that I was pointing out, where a lot of people are upset about this because you get these shill media outlets on behalf of the studios just upset of the fact that studios do need to listen to the fans. They try to say that it's just a toxic vocal minority. And I will grant the premise that a lot of the people speaking out on these things are a minority. The majority of the fan base or the majority of audiences aren't actually making videos online or writing blogs or anything like that, talking about it or even posting on social media. The majority of audiences just go about their business. And if something doesn't look good, then they just choose not to watch it. Simple as that. And when you see stuff like this, where they're deliberately subverting expectations and trying to undo what the previous movies did, you're going to have majority of audiences really not into that sort of thing. So they're going to choose like, you know what, I guess I'll just sit this one out. And that's what we saw with this. So when you're listening to the actual fans who are vocal enough to express their opinions online, that's just kind of a subsect of what the general audience is thinking about. And that's why I think it is good for studios to try to listen to what people are saying. But if they would have listened to what the audience was saying, they wouldn't have made Joker to begin with. But they decided to make it because, even the first one, people weren't really asking for that and it was successful. So I think this is a movie that could have been successful, even successful as a musical if they wanted to go down that route. But like I was saying, just from what my impressions are of it, they just didn't execute it in the proper way. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Did you watch Joker and what did you think about it? Or do you think I should watch it now, or should I just wait for it to come out on a streaming service? Or do you think it's completely wrong and this movie is actually fantastic after all? Comment below. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.